Hello, today let us visit the closest tea processing center to the holiday city of NUWARA ELIYA called Pedro. Pedro is the most sought after plantation which I ever wanted to visit due to many reasons. Decades ago, I spent many holidays with my family whenever I had the opportunity to visit my brother who was the manufacturing advisor consultant on Pedro Tea Processing Center. The children always enjoyed their stay in the bungalow, its climate and the beautiful surroundings. The factory is located about 1.5 kilometers from NUWARA ELIYA on the Kandapala road. At the time I visited last, Pedro belonged to Kalani Valley Plantations Limited and managed by Haley's Limited. The estate is situated 1951 meters above sea level at the foothills of the highest mountain of Sri Lanka called Pidurutalagala. It consists of several divisions: Moon Plains, Naseby, Lover's Leap, Pedro and Mahagastota. The names Lover's Leap and Mahagastota are used as selling marks for Pedro Teas and have been attracting the highest prices at the Colombo Auctions for several years. Going back to history, I reckon Lover's Leap, Mahagastota and Pedro had originally been separate estates. In the 1890s, Lover's Leap was owned by NUWARA ELIYA Tea Estates Limited under the management of Leechman Co. with a total extent of 232 acres, of which 179 under tea. Pedro was also owned and managed under the same outfit with 329 acres under tea. It is interesting to note Mahagastota was originally owned by Capt J.A. Baker and managed by Bosanquet Co. This estate was also known as the late Baker's Farm. It had an extent of 1000 acres with 404 acres under tea. I could not verify the exact connection between Captain J.A. Baker and Sir Samuel White Baker, but I guess there is a close relationship between the two. In mid-19th century, Mr. Samuel Baker had arrived in NUWARA ELIYA. He planned to build a house at Mahagastota and have a huge vegetable and animal farm. According to an old report, he, that is Samuel Baker, went to England and came back in 1848 on the ship called Pearl of Hardwick. Quote, he brought with him plants, animals, other equipment and goods. His brothers John and Valentine have also come with him. He also brought with him some expertise people in the farming field. Unquote. The question arose in me, is this brother referred to as John, the same Captain J.A. Baker who has been recorded in the Ferguson's directory as the owner of Mahagastota in the 1890s? An old report says, Mr. Samuel and others have faced great difficulty in transporting the goods and animals to NUWARA ELIYA. They have brought the goods in a cow cart from Colombo, not the word cow cart. It is never used like that, it's a bullock cart or something. From Ramboda, they have laboured, some people brought the goods. At a difficult point of Ramboda, the cart and all the people, including the brothers Mr. Samuel, fell down from the hill. Everyone died on the spot. Only Mr. Samuel was left. He buried the bodies at that place and came to NUWARA ELIYA. Anyhow, Mr. Samuel has accomplished his task in NUWARA ELIYA. He has made an agricultural village and named it as Baker's Farm. So the report ends. Pedro factory never failed to give a sense of peace when I visited the place. The well-kept surrounding, excellently maintained building and huge signboards give the visitors a sense of warmth and welcome even in a cold and windy atmosphere. Some of the signboards amply illustrate the past history and obviously the management had taken extra efforts to get historical facts recorded on signboards for all to see. Noticeably, the management has taken extra precautions to safeguard the tea the factory produces without getting them contaminated by outsiders visiting the factory by providing special protective gear which all visitors are compelled to wear before entering the building, just like all workers and supervisors do. Situated 1910 meters above sea level, Pedro Estate was established in 1885, less than 20 years after the first tea plants were planted in Ceylon. Interesting to note, the father of Ceylon tea, Mr. James Taylor, who started the tea planting enterprise in Sri Lanka, once owned Lover's Leap division. He planted 17 acres of tea in 1867 in Lulkandara estate in Havaheta and later in 1886 planted 200 tea plants in Naseby division of Pedro estate. A signboard near the factory says, this is the earliest recorded planting tea in Sri Lanka. The old factory, which was built in the 1880s, may be of coffee, a little away from the present factory on the Kandapala road, caught fire in the 1940s, completely destroying it, and even the engine along with its old flywheels were buried. Wheels were unearthed in 1998 when the old factory area was being prepared to build a school, and the wheels were kept as artifacts near the present factory. The present factory is relatively the closest tea processing center to the city of NUWARA ELIYA and produces 800,000 kilograms of black tea annually. Due to its close proximity to the city, the factory attracts thousands of local visitors and foreign tourists every year. Even students from faraway places visit the factory as part of their educational tours. Obviously, such large number of visitors must have become a problem to the personnel who have to focus on the day-to-day tea manufacture and other connected functions. After the disastrous fire of the 1940s, the owners and management had taken every precaution against recurrence of such a huge loss. They built 2 sets of buildings that made the new factory, connected by an underground tunnel path. Perhaps this is the only such underground tunnel path built for a tea factory in Sri Lanka. I noticed great care was being taken while transporting green leaf to the factory in plastic container. In the olden days, it used to be packed in gunny sacks, and such packing tends leaf to get partially withered before it arrives at the factory. All green leaf after weighing is pinned on troughs in one part of the factory, and once the withering process is complete, the leaf is transported to the adjoining building through the underground tunnel to undergo the rest of the manufacturing process. While the first building has woodwork in its structure, the second one holds all the fire-causing machinery in a completely woodless area, thus isolating the risk of fire. Mr. H.N.D.A. Wilford was a factory officer of Pedro under Mr. Indra Galayarachi, the deputy group manager, during the period of my visit. Looking at the high standards of the factory and the tea boutique, their dedicated contribution towards the estate seems immensely great. According to the factory manager, during the period 1981 to 1994, Pedro was brought up to perform from an ordinary non-profit making estate to a record-breaking highest profit-making property during his period, with outstanding planters such as Mr. Sunil Jayakodi and Mr. Roshan Rajadurai, who later became the managing director of Thalakala and Kalani Valley plantations. Their teams kept the teas produced at this factory maintained the highest net sale averages in the Colombo Auctions for a decade, which no other factory had been able to maintain to such level consistently. Particular mention must be recorded of the group manager Mr. Sunil Jayakodi together with the factory manager Mr. Nilam Kamis, who brought the factory achieve these record-breaking prices during their period. The present managers and factory officers continue to keep up the momentum which was geared in the 1980s, making a very high profits for the company. This is amply evident from the numerous awards, certifications, best all-time records and other displays which cover the entire reception area of the factory. There had been some historical visitors to Pedro. In 1954, 2 years after Britain's Queen Elizabeth ascended the throne, the royal couple visited Ceylon, and their planned visit included Pedro Tea Factory. On the day of the actual visit, the Queen was not well and the Duke had visited the estate alone. There the Duke of Edinburgh planted a tea bush on the estate. Pedro Factory still has some paper clippings about this event framed on its office wall. It so happened in June 2012 at the Queen's Jubilee celebrations, that is the Queen's 60th year as monarch of Britain, in London, also attended by the then President Mahinda Rajapaksa. Ceylon tea was served to the guests, specially brought from Pedro estate. This tea was plucked from a tea plot planted by Prince Philip in April 1954. The Sunday Times of June 10, 2012 had this to say, quote, "The use of pure Ceylon tea for such an important occasion comes at a time when a debate is raging in Colombo, where a group of exporters are pushing for more multi-origin tea exports against the pure Ceylon tea single origin tea that the country has been famous for. For many decades, ever since colonial British rulers shifted from coffee growing after it was destroyed by a blight to tea, Sri Lanka, formerly Ceylon, has been synonymous with Ceylon tea, which is also responsible for the growth of tourism and Britain being the country's main source market until India grabbed that position a few years back." unquote. A significant visitor to Pedro was the Imam of Mecca on 14 November 1984 during his visit to Sri Lanka, and the factory manager Mr. Nilam Kwamis took him around the factory. Then visit of Princess of Thailand, September 2013. It was only a few weeks before I visited Pedro. Another VVIP had visited Pedro, Her Royal Highness Mahachakri Sirindom, the Princess of Thailand. The entourage was welcomed on arrival at Pedro Tea Processing Centre by Mr. Namal Rajapaksa MP along with Dr. Mahesh Ranasoma, Managing Director, Dipped Products, and Roshan Rajadore, Managing Director of Kalani Valley Plantations and of Talakila Tea Estate PL. Other visitors include Crown Prince of Japan in 1952 and Robert Menzies, Prime Minister of Australia. Directly below the factory, a small reservoir has been built to feed water to the paddy cultivation of Uva Parnagama villages of Valimada. Adjoining this reservoir is a forest reserve where the famous Scout Camp is located, which attracts scouts from all over the island for camps and jamboree. Also adjacent to this camp, a firing range is located for practice and competition solely for the use of the police, services personnel and amateurs. Thank you for watching this episode on Pedro Tea Processing Centre.